So some of you eagle-eyed have spotted I am not wearing any shoes. That's because you never hide the merchandise. One of the organisations I founded is called Conscious Step. Each sock design supports a different charity. We've given a couple of $1 million to charity since we started. Matt Damon wears them, as you can see on screen there. So my claim to fame is that Matt Damon once called himself a fan. Holy moly, it's all falling apart here. A couple other organisations that have been very heavily involved in. An AI company, Smarter Drafter, replacing lawyers with robots. Turns out that's very easy to do. Humanitics, anyone who bought a ticket today used Humanitics to do that. So they've also given a few $1 million to charity and acted as a charity through that. Thunder Labs is the current one. It's a software development agency. We also have an apprenticeship program for Indigenous kids to get into tech. So a whole new pathway there. But we're not here to talk about that. My mum told me a story when I was a kid about her friend Pat. And my mum's friend Pat ended up in this place on the right. Anyone recognize that? It's Auschwitz, German extermination camp, basically. And my mum's friend Pat, as a 5-year-old girl, ended up in Auschwitz, not because she was Jewish, but because one of her grandparents was Jewish, and more than 50 years earlier had ticked that box, filled out the German census, listing them as Jewish. 50 years later, a 5-year-old girl is in like the toughest environment imaginable. Now, that grandparent 50 years earlier, handing over that little bit of data to a government that was pretty much acting in the best interests of their time, not too worried about data privacy. Why would you be? It's like, yeah, I'm just celebrating something that's great about myself. And the consequences 50 years later, that story is stuck with me because it's just a census. It sounds so reasonable. And yet, look at the impact it can have. Yeah, maybe I'll swap to handheld if there's one there. So I'm fascinated with this idea of, can an organization be ethical? Can an organization stay ethical? So some of you might be familiar with Google's originally purpose statement when they started. They said, we're here, our mission is to not be evil. And then about 10 years later, one of their senior vice presidents said, yeah, I think we've matured past that now. We don't really need that tagline anymore. And can an organization stay ethical? Now, this is a workshop. So the good news is we've got some thoughts and ideas here. The bad news is I haven't turned up with all the answers. Sorry, guys. Like, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up that sleeve. I don't know everything. I don't know how to make an organization stay ethical forever, but I've got some provocations for you and some things that have worked in different environments. And I think where we can start is with this fundamental human truth that people respond to incentives. Is this true or false? True, right? There's carrots and sticks. We move towards gain. We do the things that will bring benefits to ourselves, to our family, to the people we care about. We move away from pain. We don't do the things that hurt us or cause us frustration. But the thing is, organizations respond to incentives as well. And there's the classic, the godfather of management thinking, Peter Drucker, who's famous for saying, what gets measured gets managed. And that means what gets done as well. And so you want to know what's important to an organization? Look at the agenda of their weekly team meeting, the order of agenda items, what actually gets talked about. Not the value statements that are up on the wall and might get mentioned in a performance review once a year. What gets talked about on a daily basis? What gets measured? And so the design of an organization that wants to be ethical ultimately comes down to the design of the incentives, the inherent incentives and the structures underneath that. So what does that mean? Let's look at an example. Here's a very friendly looking financial advisor in the middle. Like, you want financial advice. We've got to get ready for retirement. We want to do the right thing on our home loan, make sure we're looking after our kids if anything happens to us. Now, of course, financial advisors are legally obliged to do what's in their customers' best interests. Now, legally obliged. Someone had to write a law saying, yeah, if you're giving financial advice, you've actually got to give them advice that's helpful for them. But here's the thing, the Royal Commission into Financial Advice uncovered that, well, people earn their money and get paid
based on the products that have the highest commission. So here you've got these conflicting interests, right? You're a financial advisor and you're struggling to pay rent and save up your own mortgage for Sydney. God knows everyone, even financial advisors have to pay a mortgage. And you're thinking, all right, well, I've got this customer in front of me and there's a few different options and, oh, what's going to be best for them? Well, this one pays a 20% commission, the other pays 19%. I can see how the 20% is better for my customer, and I can write that down. You can think, okay, the world's best financial advisor, most ethical, always does what's in the customer's best interest all the time. But there's a conflict there. There's a constant wrestle, and the incentives, the pull, slightly more towards the commission basis. Or let's have a look at this example, which is rather grim. Life insurance. I've crossed it out and written it death insurance. Frickin' marketers. I know why you hate marketers. It's death insurance, right? Life insurance pays out when someone dies. It's insuring against your death so that there's money to be passed on to family or loved ones and they're protected. Really important service designed to look after vulnerable people. Now, life insurance companies make more money the longer you live. The longer you live, the more it pays. You pay them again and again. The way it works in Australia is it gets more expensive the older you get, the idea being you cancel it eventually. There's also a type of insurance called viatical life insurance. Now, this came up during when the AIDS pandemic first came across the US. So you imagine there's a 30-year-old, someone pretty young, all of a sudden they've got AIDS and it's a death sentence back in the 1990s. They've got an insurance policy, a death insurance policy for $100,000, but that's going to come after they die. So imagine someone says, look, this is awful. What if I give you that money now and I'll just collect the payment after you die? So you can get I've got to cover my costs. So I'll give you $50,000 now and I'll collect the $100,000 after you die. Now we're into some interesting incentive area, right? So this is viatical life insurance and exists in Australia as well. Someone else is going to pay your insurance fees, collect the insurance when you die, but give someone some money up front. Now, if you've just been given an AIDS diagnosis in a country like the US where healthcare isn't free, man, that money is an absolute godsend, absolute helpful thing. But the core incentive in viatical life insurance is the sooner that person dies, the less of those ongoing fees the company has to pay. Is it beneficial? Is there a service? Yes. What's the incentive really pulling towards? And so when you think about these two examples and say, all right, well, which one of these types of insurance companies are going to campaign for something like mandatory seatbelt laws? No. Where are the incentives pulling people towards? So the provocation, the question for you is, what's the core driving incentives in your organization? Doesn't matter whether you're a charity, a for-profit business, or even in government, something pulls you in one direction. You might fight against it every step of the way and every day, but there are incentives inherent in the design of an organization. So this is how I got really excited about organizational design, because if you get these incentives right from the start, you can actually make a pretty incredible difference. Now, this is Cory Doctorow, who's sometimes considered the patron saint of the Electronic Frontiers Foundation. And he came up with this term called enshittification. I think that's such a great word. And enshittification is a word to describe the process that marketplaces go through. Two-sided marketplaces. So pretty much all the multi-billion-dollar companies that came out of Silicon Valley are experiencing this. So Facebook comes along, right? They're better than MySpace. MySpace is Fox and corporates and Rupert Murdoch, but MySpace, no, we built tools so you can get off there and you're free from MySpace and you can actually interact with people the way you want. This first process is creating exceptional value for the users of the platform. And then it comes time to monetize. And all of a sudden the incentives are about, well, let's get as many advertisers as possible onto here. And then all of a sudden you've got two captive markets. And the third phase kicks in where you try to extract as much value from both parties at the same time. So the advertisers, their costs are going up and up and up and up. They have to pay to show their ads to people who deliberately clicked follow and said, I want to hear from this company. Oh, yes, but now you have to pay to boost your post if you actually want them to see. Do you see the contrast here? So this is this process of enshittification, this inevitable pull towards a platform getting worse for the advertisers and worse for the users, and that's exactly what we're seeing in late-stage Facebook now. It's expensive for the advertisers. The users aren't getting much value out of it. Hopefully something replaces it, but then the cycle will start again. Or think about what happened with Uber, right? Uber launches and all of a sudden we've all got access to cheaper rides than were possible before, and the standards are a bit higher, and the earnings for the drivers were better off as well. Now, after they destroyed the taxi industry, which had some regulations and protections around it, well, Uber's now got two captive markets. They've got all the drivers and all the passengers. Passengers are starting to get charged more and more. Drivers are getting paid less and less as Uber's under this constant pressure to finally return a profit on this thing that had billions of dollars pumped into it. That's enshittification. That's Cory Doctorow's word, and I think it's a great explanation of how these incentives will drive these platforms inevitably towards these outcomes. So, if we want to design an ethical organization that stays ethical, we need to start eliminating adversarial incentives, where there's this conflict, where it's we want to do the best thing for our customers in terms of financial advice, but some products, some insurance products pay better commissions. Maybe that could be better. We want to eliminate those as much as possible. So let's have a look at some examples from the social enterprise space. So these are all organizations I've worked with in one way or another. They're all social enterprises. They're all doing amazing things for the world. Collectively, there's like $20 or $30 million given to charity by these organizations. So we've got Humanitix. Humanitix is a charity. It looks like a business from the outside, but it's 100% charity. It's a not-for-profit. So they say 100% of profits go towards their impact, their other charity partners. Then you've got Who Gives a Crap. And I put a typo there. That's 50% of products go to impact. Now, because they're a for-profit business, they can get money from investors. Humanitix can't do that. Who Gives a Crap got all this money from investors and was able to use that money to launch in the US and the UK. And as a result, they're giving millions and millions and millions of dollars to charity every year. Freaking amazing organization. Can anyone see an adversarial incentive when an organization, whether it's a charity or a business, shares profit? Has anyone ever worked in an organization where in about June, someone comes around and says, hey, we've got to spend our budget right now or we're not going to get it next year? Has anyone experienced that? Yeah. Profit's a bit of an ethereal concept, isn't it? Because profit can go down if you pay yourself more. Let's just give a bonus to all our staff. There's less profit for charity, but hey, the staff will be happy. And this is the thing, because at the moment, you've got the founders of Humanitix, Adam and Josh, whose levels of ethics are just off the charts. You've got the team behind Who Gives a Crap, whose ethics and heart, they're just off the charts. What about 10 years from now? What about 20 years from now? The team at Who Gives a Crap will retire one day. They've already got private equity investors involved. What choices are they going to be making 10 or 20 years from now when it's a choice between paying the directors a bonus and flying them first class for board meetings to Hawaii and giving more to charity? There's something embedded in there. Now, the way I've tried to solve that with Conscious Step, that's a sock company, is to, instead of sharing profit, we make an allocation to charity. We treat it as a cost of goods sold. I can geek out about the accounting of this for hours, believe it or not. But the point is, every sock makes a donation to charity for each pair produced, whether it's sold at full price, whether it's given away. We've separated the profit motive from the impact side of things. And it allows us to put on the packaging of socks. This pair protects a toucan, this pair plants 10 trees for every pair. And it's not after we've paid ourselves and all our costs. It's up front, the moment it's produced in a factory. So, adversarial incentives. There's kind of like the prime directive of business. And this has become the prime directive of business is to create shareholder value, right? Saying, okay, well, increase the value of shares, that's what we're here for. Now, in the US, if the CEO of a company does something that doesn't create shareholder value, they can get sued for it. So if a CEO decides, hey, we're going to give $1 million to charity this year, we had a good bumper year. Like, hang on, you just took $1 million away from shareholder value. We can sue you for that, plus costs, plus damages, and the rest of it. So we end up with these with this kind of crazy system when I think what everybody really wants is this idea of shareholder values. Because it's not just the value of shares or profit or dividend, but the values of the people who own those shares go way beyond the value of that money. People work their asses off every day to create a better world for their family, for their community, for the causes that matter to them. And there's such a disconnect between the ownership of shares and making that happen. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're the richest person in New York, and you want to step outside of your apartment building and take a deep breath and actually have clean air. Wouldn't that be nice? You can't pay for that. Your shares can be worth as many $1 billion as you like, and you cannot create that environment where stepping out of your office or apartment gives you a breath of fresh air. But it's a world worth living in and worth creating, and this is the opportunity. If we can start building shareholder values into the idea, then it becomes a lot easier. Now, private businesses can do this more easily. So here's the founder of Patagonia on screen there. There's a guy who, like the founders of Humanitix and Who Gives a Crap, ethics through the roof, carried it right through. And he was clever enough to convert his for-profit business into being owned by a charity so that it can continue to have that impact ongoing. Now, what about public businesses? Thank you, I'm all over the place here. What about public businesses, businesses listed on the stock exchange? What about, say, Commonwealth Bank or ExxonMobil or Facebook? What do they do? Well, that's when that guy comes in. Albanese. Once organizations get to a certain size, we need the regulation to combat these adversarial incentives. We need the regulators to step in and say, all right, all you financial advisors, like, I can't believe we had to make a law about this, but you're legally obliged to act in your client's best interest. Wow. Thank you, government, for making that happen. And so there's a tension here. My heart goes out to anybody who works in corporate social responsibility in a large organization, because they're people like you whose hearts are in the right place, but are in a system where all the incentives are against corporate social responsibility. So one question to ask is, can you lock this in beyond the first generation of leaders? Like when you've got your Josh and Adam of Humanitix and your Simon Griffiths of Who Gives a Crap, how do you make that go beyond that first generation? And there's actually some tools to help make that happen. Now, you recognize some of the logos on screen here, like Fair Trade, Buy One, Give One, there's a whole bunch of them. The one in the bottom left on the padlock, Certified B Corporation, who's come across that before? That's cute. Okay, good. Yeah, there's a reasonable number of people. I love the B Corporation model. So for those who haven't been through the process, B Corporation is a bit like Fair Trade, but for any kind of business. And they've got a criteria set of 200 different things. They're all good things that a business can do. And if you do about 80 of them, that's enough to be considered a B Corp. Because some will be recapturing all the waste in their manufacturing process, so it's a completely closed loop cycle, and that's an ethical way of doing manufacturing. So they get points for that. But over here you've got a law firm who don't manufacture everything, and they make sure that their clients and their staff all have equity in the business so that they're part of the decision making. That's another ethical way of doing it. So big shout out to B Corporation as a way of locking this in. It's actually one of their requirements to get that certification. That mission, that vision of we want to be doing something good for the world beyond just shareholder value, we want shareholder values, has to get locked into the constitution of the business. Now, we all know constitutions can change, even national constitutions, which probably should have changed. But it's a way of perpetuating the lifespan of this beyond any one group of people and the new investors that take over. How am I doing for time, Miss Mia? I have 7 minutes. Oh, I've gone too fast. Oh, this is cool. So people sometimes ask then, well, if it's about shareholder values, what about company values? You know, we did this offsite and we came up with these really nice words and they're in the annual report. Like, this can keep us on track, right? My favorite set of company values ever published has the acronym RICE. It's respect, integrity, communication, and excellence. Those were the 4 values of a company called Enron, which was very good at defrauding energy markets, and there was nothing ethical about that business. But where company values can actually help is when you go beyond the default into the diagnostic and the differentiator. So let me explain what that means. So the 3 Ds of values. Default values are the don't be an asshole values. Integrity, respect, putting the customer first. All the ones that, if you're a business, you should be doing these things anyway. Like, did you really need to write down honesty as a value? Okay? So you can kind of like, if you're ever doing this process, get rid of all the default ones, they don't help. The diagnostic ones are interesting when you have a problem. So diagnostic says, we don't have this in our organization right now, but it's valuable enough and important enough, we actually need to start talking about it. It needs to go at the front of every team meeting's agenda. It needs to come up in performance reviews because we don't have it. Diagnose an issue. Company values are actually a reasonable way of changing that. Now, minor example, a marketing agency I used to run had an issue with punctuality. So that had to be a value until people got the hint that you're going to do push-ups for every minute you're late to a meeting and left a client waiting. Okay, so changing these things. The last one, which is actually the more valuable one, is the differentiators, where something about your business is so valuable that it provides ongoing value to your shareholder value, it provides ongoing value to your customers, it provides ongoing value to your staff. And I think Humanitix is an excellent example of this, right? Because Humanitix takes money from the ticket price, the booking fees. No one likes paying booking fees. And then they give it to charity. But the thing is, they don't have to convince all these people out there buying tickets to use Humanitix. They need to convince event organizers to use this. And event organizers don't end up paying these fees at all. That gets passed on to the others. So what happens is Humanitix has this core value of booking fees to charity. The event organizer then gets to stand up on stage and say, hey, we ran this awesome conference on organizational design, but actually that's funded some girls going through school in Pakistan. How amazing is that? And then the attendees get to feel good as well. So this is a real differentiator against Eventbrite and everyone else who's trying to compete against Humanitix and struggling to do so as a core differentiator. This is where company values can really make that difference. I'm going to use a controversial example as well, because Elon Musk is just controversial in all sorts of ways. But he has been very clear with SpaceX that the real value there is that they're trying to make humans interplanetary. And setting that up right from the start means when staff in SpaceX say, hey, I got these stock options when I started, it's been 10 years, can we cash it out now? He's like, no, we're putting all that money towards the Mars program. You signed up for that when you got here, you got to go on that journey. So locking in those values and mission right from the start can make a huge difference. The last thing I'll say on this topic is that grey line between what's regulated, what's incentivized, and what should be done. And so what happened in the Royal Commission of the Commonwealth Bank is that a lot of legal things were done that weren't really that ethical. And a lot of time and energy was spent consulting with lawyers and making sure any marketing went through the legal team as well, and say, we can do this, yet we can do commissions in this way, but missing the question, should we actually do this? There's an excellent book called Ruined by Design, which I highly recommend anyone who's working in the technology space. And the author of this book says when he's recruiting people to his software development agency, one of the trials he gives them is says, okay, here's the design of a form. I want you to analyze the UX and show us how you do this better. So here's the first name, last name, here's the address, date of birth, gender, that kind of thing. Now, in that interview process, if they do the task excellently as instructed, they don't get the job. They only get the job if they say, why are you asking for their date of birth? Why are we getting the gender? Do we really need that? And that goes all the way back to that story my mum told me when I was a kid about Pat, who ended up in Auschwitz because somebody filled out a census 50 years earlier in an entirely different context. Not just can we, but should we? And I'm embarrassed to say that I came from the world of marketing. That's where I learnt my skills as a strategist. And the incentive for marketers is personalization. Hey, we want to do the right thing by our customers. So the better we know them, the less likely we are to show them a crappy ad. And we're going to spend less money on our advertising. So that's win-win. Can I have your date of birth and gender, please? What religion are you? Where do you live? What school did you go to? Can I have your passport so I can figure out whether I should rent you a house? Not just can we, but should we? And that gets much easier when we design these differentiated values right into the start of the business model. So, your turn. What are the core incentives of your organization? Are you really driven day by day by fundraising, by increasing sales, by NPS? What gets talked about at your meetings? What's in your calendar right now? This actually works on a personal value basis as well. And you get individuals to write down what values they have as a person. People write down family and health and contribution. Go and look at their calendar and see where they're actually spending their time. It can be a bit of a shock for yourself as well to go, oh, actually, this is what's important for me because this is what I'm making the time and energy for. Works for individuals, works for organizations. Have a think about what incentives you're creating in your life, in your organization, in your workplaces, and we might just have a go at building some ethical organizations. Thanks, everyone. Add me on LinkedIn.